Hello everyone. Welcome to the series Tech Discussions from Invent High Technologies. In this video, we are going to analyze a very interesting topic. Why is web development very hard? If you want to become a web developer, then the sooner you know this, the better. A lot of beginners are attracted towards website development and they try to learn the technology. But there are multiple components in web development and they often get stuck in the learning process, wondering where did it go wrong? Even experienced programmers who develop other kinds of softwares, when they enter web development, realize that it is complex and not as easy as they expected it to be. So, we strongly recommend that one should first try to understand how websites work and what are the various components of web development. Only after understanding that, one can have clarity in the learning process to become a web developer. Now, we are going to start with how websites work. A user opens his favorite web browser and enters the website he wants to visit. And this web browser is what we call as client in the web world. So this client then sends a HTTPS request in the internet to the server that is hosting that particular website. HTTPS means Secure Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This is like the postcard we send to the server address. Now, there is a lot of technical components and softwares in the internet which makes this request to reach the appropriate server. Those come under a separate software domain called networking. For users and web developers, the networking part of internet is transparent. So let's just say thanks to the networking magic which makes this possible and focus and proceed on the web part. So now the HTTPS request is received by the server part in the web world. The server part has a web server which is hosting that particular website. The web server checks what web page the user wants by checking the URL which the user has typed and then checks which HTML file has that page. There are HTML files hosted on the web server, so the correct HTML file is found and it is returned in HTTPS response. Again, by network magic, this response reaches the browser, which is called as client. So this client and server model is the basic foundation on which web works. Many clients will connect to server and receive the web pages. Now the browser reads the response and find there is HTML in it. Browser already knows how to process and display HTML, which the user sees as the website. While rendering HTML is also find there are other files like CSS files are required. So again, browser sends HTTPS request for CSS file and web server finds the CSS file and sends it in HTTPS response. Similarly, HTML also has required JavaScript file names, which is then fetched from files in the web server. Apart from these files, the website also can contain images, audio files, video files, which can be served through the same mechanism. The browser displays the website, which is a combination of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and other media resource files. So the website, what the user sees in the browser is called static website. This website is a read-only website where you can browse, play songs, play videos, but you cannot interact with the website. User cannot provide or update any information on the website. In early days of web, it was more of these kind of websites. To make a read-write website where user can input data or files to the website, we need to host code in the web server. And creating this code is called server-side programming. One mistake many people do is to think that server-side programs return code back to client, that is the browser. But the truth is, the client has no idea that there is a program which gets executed in the web server. This is because the client only receives HTML content for displaying websites. Browser displays websites with only HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and no other program is understood or executed by it. However, from the content of the website and how we can interact with the website, we can understand some server-side program is getting executed for handling the website. These kind of websites are called dynamic websites. And more often, the server-side program will use some specialized software for handling user data called databases. So the part which runs in the client, namely HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is called front end, and developing it is called front end development. The server-side program and database which runs in the web server is called backend, and developing it is called back-end development. Together, front-end development and back-end development is called as web development. Now we will have a very brief overview of the different components of web development. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. HTML holds the website content and it is the structure of the web page. In the earlier days of internet, HTML support varied across different browsers, and it was a nightmare for developers to make websites which is supported by major web browsers. At least this part is vastly improved in web development, and now major browsers comply with HTML5 standard, which makes this component standard and clean to learn. This was made largely possible by Firefox and Chrome capturing the browser market and making Internet Explorer as part of history. Many beginners learn HTML and make the mistake of thinking that they have learned web programming. HTML is just the tip of iceberg in web development. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. CSS is responsible for the look aspect, that is the style of the website. CSS is the nightmare of web development because it is under equipped to deliver what it is supposed to do. And on top of that, with the sudden emergence of mobile and tablet screens, the responsiveness or sizing of the website become very important for web developers. But CSS is neither easy for beginners nor powerful for advanced users. So when the whole world was scratching its head, few frameworks like Bootstrap arrived and eased the pain of many web developers. Agreed, frameworks like Bootstrap have its own limitations, but it is almost impossible for web developers to style complex websites and make it responsive using vanilla CSS. There are alternatives to Bootstrap like Bulma CSS and Tailwind CSS, etc. But Bootstrap still has a strong hold in CSS frameworks. Web developers who want to avoid frameworks like Bootstrap uses CSS preprocessors like Sass and Less. Actually speaking, Sass or Less should have been the latest standard CSS by now because they solve very basic issues with CSS. CSS is the place where every web developer struggles the most. Apart from CSS, websites also contain logos and image files to make them look cooler. Learning graphic design to create these resources is a whole different game. So, this part of using graphic designs for websites is best left to graphic designers. JavaScript is a programming language which runs the world. Oh, sorry, which runs inside the browser. JavaScript determines the behavior aspect of the web pages, that is, the interactive elements that engage a user in the web page. Beginners of web development often confuse JavaScript with Java programming language. Apart from the name similarity, they are totally different languages. Immediately after JavaScript was developed, people noticed its limitations and complexities. Also, with varying browser support for different features, this developed into a nightmare. At that time, jQuery, which is a JavaScript library, was created and it became an instant hit and got widely adopted. However, with browser standardization, many features of jQuery was incorporated into JavaScript itself, and the usage of jQuery library has been greatly reduced. However, even with the developments in JavaScript, developers find it inadequate and it has led to an explosion of JavaScript frameworks. Some of these were necessary because JavaScript has to deal with the insanity of browser DOM, which stands for Document Object Model. DOM is a building of the browser in which JavaScript has to operate. And so many JavaScript frameworks started coming frequently, and beginners are completely lost which framework to learn. And the following are the modern JavaScript frameworks: Angular, React, Vue.js, and Svelte.js. Apart from the frameworks, there are attempts to develop JavaScript language itself that has resulted in TypeScript, ECMAScript, and CoffeeScript, etc. So this is a space where every developer has to spend most time and constantly update themselves. Till now, we were looking into the components of front-end development. Now we will look into the back-end development. Web server is nothing but a computer which serves websites, and the most popular web servers run on Linux and Windows operating systems. Some of the most popular web servers are Apache Web Server, Nginx, and IIS. Luckily, this is the one component in web development which simply works and very little configuration changes needs to be done by the developer. The next component we can look is the database. Database server stores and retrieves collections of data. This is used by the server-side programming language to store the user-generated data in the websites. And the language which the database understands is SQL, meaning structured query language. So web developers have to use SQL in server-side programming language to communicate with the databases, which means developers have to learn SQL to use databases. Some of the most popular SQL databases are MySQL, Postgres, and Oracle databases. A decade back, this discussion would have stopped here. However, there is a new entry of databases called NoSQL databases, which offer their own advantages over SQL DBs. So one has to learn to use NoSQL databases now, as the way they store data is different from SQL databases. Some of the most popular NoSQL DBs are MongoDB, CouchDB, and Cassandra. Now, beginners who start learning are again confused to which one to learn first for developing websites. Simple answer is to start with any SQL DB and learn it as part of web development. Once you have experience using SQL DBs, then you can learn NoSQL DBs and start using those. Server-side programming is a code which resides on the web server and which gets executed when the web page is requested. So these programs compute and often query data from databases and dynamically generate the HTML content which then is sent to the browser. This is a space which is actually computed by so many programming languages like PHP, Python, Ruby, Perl, Java, C Sharp, Go, Kotlin, and many others. So any experienced programmer who is using one of these languages to develop other software will tend to use the same language in this space when coming to web development. For beginners, this is a path which is most confusing as to which language to learn for using in web development. Remember, right tools for the right job. So for server-side programming, PHP now is used for more than 70% of all current websites. So PHP might be the most easy to learn and efficient to develop dynamic websites. However, there is a new addition to server-side programming, which is JavaScript. With the introduction of Node.js and Express.js frameworks, JavaScript can now be used for server-side programming. However, this may not be the best language for beginners to start server-side programming. With JavaScript on client and server and using client JavaScript frameworks, and the differences in JavaScript over these different components can be frustrating for beginners. Even experienced programmers can find using JavaScript for everything to be overwhelming. So to keep it simple, if you are a beginner, start with PHP for server-side programming. Now we are going to look at two aspects of web development which was not mentioned before. These should be present as part of all components and needs special attention from web developers. The first is the website testing part. Big companies have dedicated team for testing their websites, so they find out and fix issues. However, web developers have to do this themselves and test the changes thoroughly before pushing to internet. The second aspect is the security compliance of the website. There are many hackers, and you don't want your website to be hacked or your valuable data to be lost. Big companies spend a lot on this aspect as any mishap could damage their reputation and cause heavy financial damages. So, web developers should take the security aspect seriously in all components of web development. Big companies have dedicated team of developers who work on front end and back end development. However, as a beginner or someone who wants to be a full stack developer, you have to learn each component in the web development. Also, if one is an independent web developer, one has no choice but to be a full stack developer and become proficient in each part of the web development. So now you have understood the many components and complexities involved in web development, which makes it very hard to master it. However, by already knowing it is complex and spending enough time to learn and use each component of web development, one can become a very good web developer. All the very best. Thank you for watching this video, and we hope you are now ready to begin your journey to become a web developer. Thank you and bye till our next video.